What's happening, everybody? It's your boy CY, Mr. 8020. Hey, this is the Genesis Podcast, the Renaissance of Manhood, and I am excited today with my guest. This is somebody that's gonna blow your mind. It's a good friend of mine. It's my neophyte. More so than anything, he's a brother on the front lines, fighting for justice for the downtrodden, people that don't have a voice. So, with no further ado, I'm going to introduce to you none other than Lee Merritt, Esquire. What's up, Lee? How you doing, team?
We're going to plug in the applause track.
We got you.
Good to see you, brother. Carlton Young. I guess I got to go with the official names. I can call you DP or CY.
No, you call me whatever you want to, bro. This is just a conversation, man. So I appreciate you taking the time and carving some space out of your busy day to sit down and chat with me. It means a lot to me. And one of the reasons I really wanted to have you on here, man, is I've seen your rise and your ascension into walking into your assignment on this earth, which I believe what you're doing is your assignment, right? Your
Absolutely.
Purpose. And so I've seen it, and I remember, you were working for DISD when we first met. Now to see what you're doing and how you're changing lives, man. So I wanted to bring you on here, man. Just talk about mindset, right? The Genesis it talks about the beginning. So I believe that all men should go back to the beginning, which is Genesis 1:28, and that we should be fruitful, we should multiply, we should do, and we have dominion. And I believe those are some things that we can do as men that will allow us to kind of get back into the leadership seat. And so I know a lot of things that you deal with have a lot to do with sometimes a lack of leadership with some of these young men that you interact with on a daily basis. And more so than anything of that, man, is people don't know. A lot of people don't know your backstory, where you come from, and how you've transformed and come to this person that we now know. But you are a young man from L.A., right? The turf, the ground zero for gang warfare. So,
yeah.
I want you to kind of, as we move through this conversation, I want you to introduce the people, let them know who you are, and then we'll dive deep into this conversation and try to dig a little deeper. So I really want the people to get to know you and understand your heart, and really understand that what you're doing is God's work, not just something that you're doing for glory.
Absolutely. Well, by way of introduction, obviously my name is Lee Merritt. In fact, not my name. My name is Stacy Sylvester Lee Merritt. So I'm Stacy from LA today. And I do civil rights work. Organized mostly around police violence, but I represent families from across the country for constitutional violations, corporate discrimination, and other forms of bigotry. Some of the cases that your listeners might be familiar with are the cases of Ahmaud Arbery here in North Texas. There was Botham Jean, Tatiana Jefferson, Jordan Edwards. Unfortunately, the names in the roll call gets longer every month. And more recently, I've represented the family of Ralph Yarrow, near where your home base is, Steve Perkins in Decatur, Alabama. And I continue to do the work of trying to reform the deadliest police culture in the modern world, the most incarcerated nation in world history. And as you pointed out, there's a reason that I got into this work. It's because I was raised in it. My father is a member of Rolling 60s Crip. He goes by the name of Murder Rock. My earliest memories of him was incarceration. I visited my father in jail. I learned intricately somehow that the prison industrial complex was built for me, that it was built for my family members. All of my uncles went there, and all the music that I listened to, and I mean my own personal observation said that I would be there one day if I was lucky. The alternative was to be shot and killed in the street like my best friend Cornelius. And unfortunately for a lot of black men in America, that's just our reality. It's a statistical reality that we grew up with. It's expressed in Hollywood, it's repeated through the music, and we grow up thinking it's normal, And as I came into my adulthood, I began to realize that 1 out of 3 black men going to prison is just not normal. And the fact that I've been able to avoid a lengthy prison sentence in my lifetime should not be an extraordinary feat. I now have 3 boys that I'm raising, and knowing that 1 out of 3 black men ended up in prison, and for my brothers and I, it was 2 out of 3. I decided early in my practice, before I even started having kids, that I wanted to change the world. That's, we talked about vision boards, and that's what I wrote on everything when I was a kid. That's what I scribbled on the desk. That's what saved as my screensaver. We got to change the world. That the way that it is not acceptable for us to raise children in. What I was able to overcome, it's by the grace of God, and I thank God for my background because it makes me who I am. But that should not be the baseline reality for so many inner city black youth. And my practice, my purpose, my mission, my vision, what God has put inside me is about changing that.
Wow. Man, you said a lot of things to unpack there, right?
Yeah.
First of all, you said that you come from the gang culture, and your father, like the immediate role model that you had, was part of the prison industrial complex, right? So then your uncles, right? And now you have two out of there's three men in your family, brothers, right? You have two other brothers, and so 2 out of 3 have been to prison.
Right.
Wow.
They served over a year time, so served felony time.
Wow.
And in this culture, they call them felons. Obviously,
Right.
I don't accept that title because my whole family is felons in that regard. But yeah, we've been labeled with felonies. We participated actively. I learned intricately what they meant by the school to prison pipeline, because my brother, for example, my oldest brother Dwayne, who you've met, he has tubes in his ears. He had them since he was a kid. They were supposed to be removed. It affected his hearing, so he couldn't hear on his right side. So when the teacher spoke to him, he wasn't giving them the response they needed, so they put him in special education. And he went from special education to alternative school to juvenile to prison. And that's the prison to school pipeline. For me, we were hungry, you know what I'm saying? And there were ways to make money in the streets.
Right.
We could shoplift. We did a lot of shoplifting as a kid, got caught doing that, got labeled, got a record. If one of us fights in my household, culturally, we all fight. And so that had me fighting grown men and getting the record for that as well. And there was, I don't know, there was just so much that was loaded against us that I got to see with my own eyes. You know, my brother, who's a genius, my middle brother, Gregory, fixed my Mercedes-Benz one day with, I swear, like a toothpick and a paper clip. Like, he has an immaculate mind, but it doesn't operate well in a classroom setting. Mm-hmm. And I see that in my oldest son, who is on what they consider on the spectrum. Mm-hmm. But he learns quickly, and then he gets bored, and he's ready to move on. My son, Stacy Sylvester Lee Merritt II, was kicked out of first grade, was kicked out of second grade, and they tried to put him in a continuation school.
Wow.
Because he learned so differently. Mm-hmm. And it's those things that have been my motivation. I became an educator right out of undergrad, taught in Camden, New Jersey, which is the most dangerous city in America, the poorest city in America. Fell in love with that community, honed my craft, helped to, I had to skip through the resume, but helped to launch a school for law and social justice in Atlanta. Did that work for a while before I went ahead and went back to law school myself.
Wow, man, that's interesting. You got a lot of stuff we're going to try to dig in and unpack in a short amount of time. But the first thing that I like, you said something right. We got somebody that's a felon trying to run for president. Mm-hmm. So if it's okay for him to run for the presidency of the United States with a felon, it should be okay for these young men that have made mistakes to be able to go out and gainfully employ themselves, right?
Yeah.
And
if we're honest.
Right.
If we're honest. What we mean by felon is nigger, right?
Wow.
And Donald Trump is not a nigger, he's a felon.
Right.
And we accept felons in our culture. We praise felons in our culture.
Right.
We don't accept black criminality because we don't like blackness itself. The crime is being black.
Right.
Ahmaud Arbery's crime when he was running down the street was being black, but what did they call him? They called him a felon. They said he was breaking into someone's houses.
Exactly.
The truth is, it was Sunday afternoon, he was just jogging down the street.
Right.
As a black man, but criminal is the new black.
Right. Not black is like, not orange is. Orange is the new black. I think was that the name of that show?
Orange is the new black.
Yeah, now it's criminal is the new black.
Criminal is the new black.
Right. So as you unpack a lot of the things that you were saying, I want to touch on your son as well, right? Mm-hmm. Talk about your brother, right? How the system is not set up. It's set up on standardized tests. Mm-hmm. Being able to just walk through a mindless curriculum to be able to put you out in society so you can work for somebody else. It's like we don't tap into people's gifts. No. You know, if you would have asked my mom, I was the same way, right? I was pretty smart actually, but I got bored easy and I was mischievous and I had a lot of energy, right? They literally tried to put me on Ritalin and all this stuff when I was younger, but my mom would not allow them to do it. Now they probably would put her in jail or take me from my family because she would not allow them to put me on the medication that they want to, like, dummy us down and drug us up, and basically set us up to go to the right instead of straight forward. So that's interesting, man, and thanks for sharing that, man. That vulnerability is powerful, right? And that's one thing I want to people to understand on this podcast that are watching, right? How vulnerability is really your superpower, right? And by you saying that, you could have saved somebody else's life, and you could have opened their mind up to see something differently. But it's powerful that you had the wherewithal to even say, no, you're not going to put my son in this space. I know what's going on with them, and I'm going to fight you tooth and nail in order for you not to label my child and put him and set him up for failure in the future.
Yeah.
Because other kids, other children, other ethnicities, they don't set them up for failure.
That's right.
They give them every resource, give them every opportunity to fix what they consider to be the problem,
right,
in order for them to be productive citizens in society. So, with that said, what was it at a young age that said, they say you're born looking like your parents' decisions, you die looking like your own.
Mm-hmm.
What was it in that process where you said, I don't want to go down this pathway? I know this is the societal and cultural norm that I see on a daily basis, but I'm going to be something different. I'm going to do something different. What do you think it was that like that green light or that switch that flipped that said, Lee, I'm going to go to college. I'm going to do all these things to become a voice in the crying in the wilderness to help these people that need this help?
Yeah. It's really hard to nail it down to one thing. I've been talking to my brother again about this recently, and he says, my oldest brother, who's known me since I was born and who watched me develop, he said, you were always like a grown little man. Like it was this consciousness about yourself. I remember visiting my father in prison for the first time. I remember I was very young. I remember the Buffalo Bills were playing the Houston Oilers for a big playoff game. I remember seeing all the men in orange jumpsuits and wanting to hug them, right? So I was that small. But I remember thinking, I don't want to come back here and involuntarily. And I began to look at my father as the what to do, what not to do, right? Oh, Dad has tattoos, won't be getting any tattoos. Dad uses profanity, I won't be using profanity. Dad joined a gang, gangs aren't for me. And that consciousness of Pops ends up in situations where, he's at odds with Mom. He's constantly under threat of death on the streets, and the government constantly wants to put him in a cage that he's not strong enough to escape. I was like, that's not the life that I want.
Right.
And I'm thankful for that mindfulness as a child. I've taught in inner city Atlanta, inner city Camden, and I've worked with kids all over the country. And it's that self-driven desire to say, hey, these are my circumstances, and I don't want to repeat them. And then it began to look around for ways to navigate out of it. For me, it was reading. From way back to reading Rainbow to, just my mom taking us to the library. I learned that I could learn about worlds, about cultures, about society. I read a lot of ghost books and got into spirituality. But for me, reading was transformative. It changed both how I saw the world and from what perspective I saw the world from. I could learn to see the world from other people's perspectives by reading their biographies and learning about how they went about becoming who they were. I'm big on autobiographies, and I obviously this autobiography of Malcolm X, Sada Shakur wrote an autobiography that was really powerful and transformative in my youth. But there's so many people who have overcome circumstances that were far worse than mine. Mine were pretty tough. But the world is full of records of people who've gone on to accomplish amazing things. And what I found, and this was the important thing, that people who were born into auspicious of circumstances, people who were born into poverty, people who were born into violence, if they decided that they wanted to overcome that, they became more effective in every other setting that they were into. So it was something about that dirt that gave you the nutrients that you need to go very, very strong. And I went there with that mindset. I was like, okay, I'm going to Morehouse. I understand that your dad's name's on the building and your legacy from Dr. King and your legacy from Benjamin Elijah Mays. I'm from South Central LA. I shouldn't be here. And so there's no way that anybody on this campus can beat me at being me. I'm going to be the best at me.
Right.
And it was that mindset that I think drove me to accomplish things.
Right, right. So what I basically hear you saying is that you form in your mind through personal development by reading books, by educating yourself, and expanding your outlook on life. Right. That you did not allow the vicissitudes of life to determine who you were in that present space, and you decided that I'm going to take every opportunity I can and use every resource available, no matter how minute, to become the person that I desire to be.
That's right. And it came from inside of me. And quite frankly, it came from God. God put something in my spirit as a child. I don't know if it was a great grandma who prayed over me, but I came into this earth with a purpose and a connection to my father, my spiritual father, and he's just constantly fed into me. So a lot of the things, like I mentioned to you, I found my journal. I'm looking forward to going back to read my college journal, because like the words that I write for other people, like some of the poetry that I write, those words don't come from me. It's God speaking to me. So now I guess, what was God saying to me 20 years ago that may still be applicable today? You know?
Right. So basically what you're saying here is Habakkuk 2 and 2, write the vision down, make it plain.
That's right.
So when you read it, you can run with it. I'm paraphrasing it. I'm not spitting them verbatim. So he just dropped a nugget for the listeners who are complaining about life, saying that life is not fair. Life is gonna life. Things are gonna happen. The change begins with you, right? Your outlook determines your outlook. Basically, what you think is what you will get.
That's right.
And I often tell people, in order to be something, you have to become it first. And then once you become it, you get the thing that you're looking for. So I do appreciate you sharing that with me, man. And I do, once again, want to thank you for the hard work you do, because I know it's a lot that comes at you with this work, right? When you're walking in assignment, you're walking in what God has told you to do. It's a lonely road, right? I'm finding that out now as I'm navigating it and blazing this path that God is laying out to me step by step. How do you deal with the naysayers, the negative comments? And you know what, for me, what hurts me when I read comments sometimes as it relates to you or anybody doing anything positive is it's typically our own people that are the worst offenders, right? They're the ones that are sitting there with the Mac spraying you with everything that they can think of, because one, I believe a lot of people cannot see people in a good light when they don't have enough value within themselves to see themselves as valuable.
Yeah.
So how do you overcome that, and how do you just put that to the side and say, I'm going to continue to move forward in what I'm doing, regardless of what people say, regardless of how they treat me, regardless of what I hear?
There was a gospel song when I was a kid. It said, "Whose report shall you believe? We shall believe the report of the Lord."
Yeah, I know
right?
that song.
And that's what I had. I had to tune everything else out. I don't believe, like, if I listen to, and I think it goes back to the ground, to the nutrients that we came out of, the dirt that we came out of. I was already supposed to be dead,
Right.
or in jail. I was already supposed to be less academically inclined than my peers. I was always supposed to be drug inclined, promiscuous, to lack or to have certain toxic masculine traits. That is what everyone kept saying. That's what the music kept saying. That's
Right.
what the families kept saying. That's what the neighbors kept saying. That's what my mom projected on me when she expressed her fears. And I had to remember, it's like, nah, God called me to be more than a conqueror. Y'all don't understand. God called me to be, the next Thurgood Marshall in my mind. Like,
Right.
that's who I am.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to do those things. And whether or not, and then I appreciate, again, because I study people like Thurgood Marshall and Johnny Cochran and the rest. And I was like, oh, and by the way, just like Jesus Christ or MLK, they didn't like him either.
Right, right.
They had, at the time that MLK was assassinated, he was probably one of the least popular people in America among both black and white folks. And that's a bit of exaggeration. He was a lot less lauded than he is today.
Right.
He had a significant following, but he had a lot of naysayers, and they were a large part of that was from within the black community. Learning that that's part of it. That if no one's criticizing you, you're not doing the right thing, right? Because
right.
if you're not facing any opposition, you're on the wrong side of the road, right?
Right,
You need
right,
to go
right.
against the grain. So when I read that, when I see that, it's affirmation for me. Like, you must be doing something right.
Right. Now that's good stuff, man. And I often think of the Bible because we both have a strong spiritual foundation. And for the thing for me, as you continue to walk down God's path, and you end up, you start doing things that, you know, might not be so well received, or, you know, might not be what people want to hear, right? I'm often reminded that, you know, they killed Jesus, right? They didn't even receive him. His own brother was talking noise about him, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
And the Bible says that a prophet is not received in his own country. So oftentimes you have to understand, when you're doing something that God wants you to do, the kickback and the talk and the chatter is going to be excessive, because one, you have to understand, when you're breaking cycles and curses and patterns, that the enemy does not like that, right? So he's going to go with spiritual warfare, and what quicker way to get you to detract from what you're doing than have the people that are closest to you plant seeds of doubts, plant seeds of uncertainty, and tell you what you're doing doesn't matter, and telling you that you are not good enough to do it.
People that you're fighting for, people that your assignment is to deliver, right? Those are the ones who are coming at you. And what you learn in that process, and it's important because we don't live in this age anymore. We live in the age of likes and follows and social media popularity. And so people see for example, I have a huge social media platform, hundreds of thousands of followers, and they think, well, that's your validation. Sometimes that's how people meet me. You didn't meet me with hundreds of thousands of followers.
Right.
My character hasn't changed between that and them, and they can take them all away.
Right.
Doesn't affect my economy, doesn't affect my ability, my influence in the world, doesn't affect my profession. I don't need your approval. My job is not to get your approval. My job is actually to free you.
Right.
And so many of you all don't even realize you're in chains.
Right.
And so that's why you're criticizing me. You're like, why is he walking around like he can just be free? And it's like, you can't. You really can't. And I have to walk this out for you to see it. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
So,
wow, that's crazy. You said something right there, is not knowing that you're bound. And a lot of us walk in that space of not knowing that you're bound.
And then get offended by people who aren't bound.
Right. Well, they said that if the truth sets you free, then the lack of self-awareness of self will keep you bound.
Yeah.
And a lot of times we lack the self-awareness of ourselves, right? We think we're okay. I dealt with that, you know, up into my 50s, right? I look in the mirror and I think I'm good, but really I got a lot of work to do, right? And the trauma and my upbringing kind of laid the basis for that, and it takes the work, the internal work, and that's what the genesis is about, like the Renaissance, going back to the beginning, figure out where it went wrong, and then correcting those wrongs within yourself in order to be able to walk this life out in the way that you were designed to, right? Because I think that the way that the enemy works is he takes childhood trauma to detract us from who we are meant to become. What easier way than to confuse you at an early age of what you are capable of, if you know what you are capable of and you know what God has made you to be. He's designed you to do certain things, and if he can get you to, at an early age, start to question that, he stops everything that God has placed in you. One thing I do know is that the enemy cannot stop anything that God placed in us. It's up to us to get to the point where we unlock it and God can release it to the world. It takes work, right?
Yep.
And what it sounds like to me is you've done the inner work, right? You did the personal development, the reading. You dealt with the things that you needed to deal with from your childhood in order to be able to be free enough, right?
Yeah.
But a lot of times I think a lot of us, we like a lot of information, but we don't like transformation.
That's right.
And I think we spend so much time collecting information
or
sound bites of information. So, yeah, that's a beautiful thing, brother. And I love what you said, because if you live for people's applause, you will die by the lack of applause. Because as sure as they are applauding you and clapping you on your back and telling you how great, they're going to turn around and kill you and tell you you ain't. Hey, crucify him.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So I like that. So let me ask you this, man. Let's shift gears a little bit. And as far as criminal justice system is concerned, do you think it is reformable?
Reform is one of those words that in the movement we've rejected.
Right.
You know, you don't tinker around at the edges on a system that was designed against you. When we're talking about criminal justice in America, we have to look at what we're actually talking about. Not like what, you know, the pro-black folks are talking about, not what the white supremacists are talking about, but what do the history and the facts tell us? The history and facts tell us that we, as America, developed out of a unique period in human history, 400 years of chattel nadir slavery, right? And this form of slavery was unique in human history that it was generational. They cast a whole group of people as less than human, right? And so that's the backdrop of the American story. We come out of that into, just getting into the 20th century, or into the 1900s. We go into Reconstruction, and they create this prison industrial complex. That's the start of the prison industrial complex, where we're leaving the fields in 1865 and moving us into our second-class citizenship in America, because we didn't have the housing or the resources to continue to subjugate this population. We created prisons, and first it was the chain gang, and it was minimalized. When I say that, they weren't able to lock up all the Negroes because we weren't committing crimes. They were writing new black codes and making new crimes for us.
Right.
But long story short, in the last 50 years or so, they've decided to reinvest in this new prison industrial complex. I have to call it new because the one that I was born into, the one I described to you, was the first time in human history. In fact, there's been no nation in the recorded history of the world who has incarcerated so many of its people. I got to stop there for a second. There's been no nation in the history of the world who has the prison populations that we have, right? Now, consider that in the context of the history that I just talked about. Imagine if Germany boasted the #1 nation in the world for the death penalty. And for whatever reason, people that Germany put to death the most was Jewish. Most people will go, oh, hold on.
Right.
There's something wrong with that. Isn't this
Yeah.
the people who are trying to kill all the Jews?
Yeah.
So we have the largest prison industrial complex in the world, where you're stripped of your humanity, where you're considered a slave according to the 13th Amendment.
Right.
And in that system is mostly black and Latino folks. The statistics will tell you, the courtroom documents will tell you that the people who are incarcerated, who are mostly black and Latino, are committing the same crimes at the same rates in some of the same jurisdictions as white folks. They're just not going to prison for it. All right, so now we're dealing with the reality of, this is a race-based system of punishment, right? Now we can start to talk about solutions. If we have a race-based system of punishment that's birthed out of slavery, then how do we overcome that? First we call it what it is. Then we have to go back and right some of these wrongs. We have to tear down the prisons. We have to take all the laws that they put on the books 50 years ago. 50 years ago, there were 100,000 prisoners in all of the United States. Today, there's 7.6 million people under some form of state supervision, prison, or parole. It's an explosion of incarceration, right? Why? And it didn't happen because there was an explosion of crime. You heard about it running parallel with the so-called crack epidemic. Well, they created new crimes to associate with the drugs that they were flooding our streets with, right? First thing we need to do is go back and dismantle all those laws that they put in place to criminalize poverty, to criminalize mental health, to criminalize addiction, which is just a sickness. It's not a crime. No other nation, no other modern nation treats it as a crime. Once we start dealing with that and dealing with the real issues, I think we start moving towards solutions. Obviously, this is where we get into subject matter expert. I can speak on this all day, but that's at the heart of it.
So one thing that I think about often when we talk about this prison industrial complex is it's a for-profit system too.
Yeah.
So that probably needs to be addressed in some way, shape, or form, because if there's money to be made in a capitalist society, people are going to use that to their advantage.
Human rights be damned.
Right.
And one of my when I first got to Morehouse, one of the ways that I wanted to even the playing field between me and my peers who were from what some might consider better pedigree is I wanted to run for office. So I ran for office and got elected to the board of trustees for Morehouse. And so I got to see who Morehouse was doing business with. One of them at the time was Sodexo. Sodexo is a food catering services that caters to the prisons, and they build and fund private prisons. And why were they at Morehouse? Right? Well, they want to feed us too, but they also wanted to keep that dollar circulating within their business. That the money that they were exploiting out of black folks at Morehouse, they want to put it back into a system that was designed for black and brown exploitation. And so, I honestly, I've lost where I was going with that.
No, I understand where you're going. We're talking about the money, right, and the greed and the capitalist society with the prison industrial complex, because you were talking about reform. So that was the thought of my mind. And I know as long as...
But you got to get to the dollar behind it. So Sodexo, we got Sodexo off the campus of Morehouse, but they still run private prisons. We won't see a reduction in this prison population, this boom of prison. It made somebody rich. We're talking about a lifetime that this has been around.
Right.
This has made somebody rich, and if you follow the dollar, you'll get to what criminal aspects, when I say criminal aspects, what human rights violations exist that upholds the system of incarceration.
So what would you say to a young man that is on the borderline of making the wrong decisions, and they can go left or they can go right? They can go through the prison system and become another number, or they can, change their life and venture out into a educational space, a space of personal development and growth. What would be your number one piece of advice to that young man that's 13, 14, 15, in those formative years where they may not have the best role model, and they say, that's okay for Lee Merritt, he's strong enough, but I am not strong enough to overcome my obstacles in my environment?
The hypothetical young man that you're describing is overcome by the pressures, by the assumptions of society based around him. One of my favorite authors, James Baldwin, wrote a letter to his nephew, who fits into this proverbial young man who needs help. And he said, this innocent country set you down in the ghetto in which in fact it intended that you should perish. It goes on and says, let me spell out precisely what I mean by that. You were born where you were born and face the future that you face because you're black, for no other reason. The limits of your ambition were thus expected to be set forever. You were not expected to aspire to excellence. You were expected to make peace with mediocrity. If for that young man, if that truth, that the reality that you're considering giving yourself over to is the one exactly designed for you, that you were not expected to aspire towards excellence, you are supposed to make peace with mediocrity. If that's okay with you, the society will help you there. If you make the other choice, literally, and I believe this as a kid, I believe it today, and I tell it to the youth that I mentor, putting in your mind the opposite of whatever you want to be, whatever it is you want to accomplish, and you can do that. In the same resources that exist to hold you back, there's an infinite level of resources, a God from heaven who has unlimited resources and authority, who will guarantee that you reach your goal as long as you move toward him. Mm-hmm. And it really comes down to choices. I wrote a poem about it.
As I said, I don't know if you remember in Living Color back in the day. He said I wrote a song about it.
Like here you go.
There you go.
It says, you stand at a crossroad. Where you go from here is your choice, whether it's on or off road. You can go from here today determined to make goals and reach them. Or you can go from here with a mindset to make babies and leave them. You can leave here with the attitude that the world owes you a break. Or you can decide that you owe your family too much to become anything less than great. You can focus on what you don't have and the pain that others can't relate to. Or decide to make the most out of the gifts that God gave you. You can spend next year preparing for college and a career. Or take the first steps of a path leading towards prison facing years. Your life can be filled with options, like whether you want to drive your Lexus or your Act, or you can be at the drive-thru asking your customers, would you like fries with that? You can get used to the sound of someone shouting, put your hands together and interlock your fingers like laces, or, ladies and gentlemen, put your hands together, introducing the world's greatest. What you decide will be the difference between a corporate job and scrubbing pots. One day we might see you on TV, but will the show be cribs or cops? What you decide will be the difference between living in the hills or the slums. Your choices will either lead to having a life or having fun. Hourly or salary, dreams or reality, sufficient or poor. This may sound overly simple, but the decision is yours. The vision is yours. The life that you've been given is yours. Key point, you're a product of your decisions and what you're willing to work for. So leave here today knowing that nothing can stop you but yourselves and the choices that you make. God bless. Choose well.
Whoa, Lee Merritt with the hot 16. Hey, I need a beat machine. Hey, that's dope, brother. I love how you take that gift of poetry and use it for good, right?
Yeah,
so I definitely think that is something that a young listener needs to grasp onto, and just, I think it's also right, finding people who look like where you want to go and not where you're at.
Yeah.
Right. I often say to people, if you got this little tug on you that there's something better, that's God letting you know that there is something better, and you listen to that tug, you listen to that pull, because God is not gonna come down and be like, Lee, go to the right. No, He's gonna give you little context clues, little pulls, little tugs to let you know He has something better for you. It's up to you to catch the clues, to sit still long enough to be able to understand who it is and what's talking to you, right?
Yeah.
So I definitely think that is a powerful, powerful poem, and I definitely know that probably sparks a lot of attention if you do that in public around the kids.
Yeah, yeah.
Is that something that you do?
I do occasionally. Part of my gift that you are familiar with me using to get heat off of us is I use my words. As a young man, I wanted to be a rapper. Lyric is what they called me.
Okay.
And put out some music, and now, I'll tell you something, and we'll kind of dip into the music industry. I'm from LA, so pursuing music was a real thing. We were connected with Warner Brothers, and we were making beats and things like that. And I had gotten my own little following, and were gifted some tracks by a major studio, and they wanted to sign me and my boys, Dark Sky. And they told us what they wanted us to rap about. They gave us a list, and we went back with our songs, and they said, no, you didn't talk about bitches. You didn't talk about blunts. You didn't talk about these things, and you should go back and write it again. And I made a decision at that point. I wanted to use my gift for the glory of God. So if that's what the music industry required, I was out. And that's now I get to use my gift only for, because I mean, honestly, the words that come out, those aren't even my words. Right.
Exactly.
So, I couldn't have changed it for them if they wanted me to. It would have been bad.
Right. Yeah, God would have got you for that.
Yeah.
But that's interesting how they want you to sow seeds of discord, seeds of destruction, seeds that will take root in an impressionable young mind. So I definitely applaud you for the courage to walk away from that, because so many of us, especially if you've come from the inner city, or you've been in a life where you've lacked a lot, so now you have the opportunity to change your life. If you just say a few things that you might not agree with, but that goes to, what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and lose his soul, right?
That's right.
And that's what we have going on a lot with our young men, is you're gaining tangible material things that don't last.
That's right.
And typically what happens is what? Death, incarceration, destruction, and your life just in disarray. Yeah. So, for the young men that are listening to the podcast, for the person that's going through something in this podcast and looking for a quick way and an easy way out, the easiest way is not the best way. The easiest way actually costs more than the hard route.
Yeah. And 100%. I can remember being 16 and having already accomplished a lot. By the time I got to high school, I had been expelled from school twice. Once for my brothers jumping the principal, another for carrying a gun and drugs in the middle school. And so the fact that I had an opportunity to graduate high school was a big deal. I would be the first person in my household, among my older brothers, my mom and my dad, to graduate high school in the traditional manner, right? So that was something. And then to say, all right, now I can pursue a career in music, which was my big brother's dream. That's one option, but they want me to compromise who I am. I could go play football for UCLA, right? I'll be ramming my head into people full time as a linebacker. And they don't care about who I am academically, because I saw myself as a scholar back then, a student athlete, but student came first, and I cared about. And so I had that decision, and then I had Morehouse, right, which is just where Trey Styles from Boys in the Hood went at the end of the movie.
Is that how you picked it?
That's how I saw it. That's the only thing I knew about Morehouse. I had never visited the campus. I didn't have friends who were there or relatives were there, so it's like I can go to that one school that Trey Styles went to. Right? This fictional character from Boys in the Hood.
Shout out to John Singleton,
right?
The Boys
John
in the Hood,
Singleton,
for that.
who graduated from my high school, who I watched run up and down the street with cameras and filming Boys in the Hood, because I was a kid in the hood when he was filming.
Oh,
it,
wow!
And so yeah, thank you, John Singleton, for putting that light at the end of the tunnel, for pointing a generation of people in the right direction. With that, just one little plug of Morehouse College there. Yeah, I made the decision. I said, all right, well, I know I'm not going to do the compromise rap thing. Football was still up there. I still wanted to bang my head against people, but God was leading me towards Morehouse. So that's the
wow. That's interesting how God has predestined your life and how you were able to discern which was the right choice for you, right? Because we typically know if you play football, if you make it through college, the likelihood of you getting drafted and staying in the league is, slim to none.
Oh,
and if you do make it to the league, what your career is, the average career is 2 to 3 years or 2 to 4 years, somewhere in there. I don't know the exact numbers.
Hats off to all the men who have dedicated themselves to that profession. My LB is a football player. One of my previous LBs is an NFL player.
Yeah.
And it takes so much dedication and hard work, and people don't appreciate all the effort that it requires to be given to that field. But now, as we look at things like CTE, we look at the fact that they are not being paid on a comparable level, the racism that exists within the National Football League, quite frankly. It is a hell of a cost to pursue that lifestyle.
Right. Yeah. You are trading your health in your later years for a couple years of glory and money. So, yeah, again, shout out to football because we all love it. I played back in my day in high school. I wanted to go on further, but academically I wasn't where I needed to be, and for other things. But hey, it is what it is. So my next question is, Lee, is with all that you've said, like, what do we do now as a group of adult men in our late 20s, early 20s, early 30s, 40s? Where do we start as a collective group to start a movement that literally changes the course of our communities? Because I don't believe that, I hear people always complaining about what did Obama do for black people, what did Biden and Kamala Harris do for black people, blah blah blah. Like, I don't think any of them can save us. I think it all begins with us.
That's right.
So what do we do as a collective group of men? Because I believe it starts with the men, because we should be the leaders. Where do we start?
I have to start with an ancient Chinese proverbs, and I hate to be so philosophical, but it says, if there's light in the soul, there's beauty in the person. If there's beauty in the person, there's harmony in the house. If there's harmony in the house, there's order in the nation. If there's order in the nation, there's peace in the world. It starts with the light within. In the month of September, I just went on a fast. I typically don't try to brag on fast, but it was so transformative. I'll talk about it now. I went on a 21-day strictly water fast. And that was me checking myself, right? Emptying out myself, literally emptying out myself, reseating the start of my day, where it was about feeding the belly, to reseating the soul as the top, the light. How do I feed my spirit today? How do I feed my mind? How do I feed every other aspect of this living thing beyond the stomach? It's just one aspect of it. It's meant to create energy for us to do activities. But a lot of us have put our stomach as the Lord of our life, right? And even if it's not your stomach, if it could be your watch, it could be your car, because since September, I flipped that and started fasting outside of my body, because I realized that the world operates like my body. So the same way I was constantly consuming and feeding the stomach, now I'm constantly consuming and feeding the bank account, because the bank account has to pay for all these things that I'm constantly consuming: the cars, the trips, the travel, all of those things. It comes from me not having the light in my soul. What is my purpose? What do I wake up everything to do? And if every day doesn't move me closer to my purpose, then what am I doing?
Right.
And that's an individual decision. And so there's a lot of defeatism about, well, it's not Obama, it's not Jasmine, it's not Lee, blah, 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 blah. That doesn't matter. It is about you, right? And what you've decided to do with the life that you've been given. And so I honestly think it starts there, where we become introverted and think about what God has called us to do, because it may not, and this is fine with me, it may not be this generation that God wants to accomplish the vision that he put inside of me. I just got to do my part. Right. And my sons will take over. I'm raising some bad men. Right. I feel you. And they're going to be okay. You know what I'm saying? And the world that they inherit from me, from what God is passing down on me, man, stand back. I study history. I study men and cultures and things like that. The number one defeater of movements is self-defeat. It's not armies, it's not resources, it's not a better organized nation or a better organized opponent. It is me not believing that I can do it. One historical figure that I've been looking at that I believe it begins to answer your question, because I think we find ourselves in similar circumstances, and this country has come up recently in politics, but it's the leader of the Haitian Revolution. His name was Toussaint Louverture. And Toussaint was born into slavery. He was 41 years old when he was released from slavery. That means when he was my age before he even had an opportunity to be anything other than someone else's property, right? Wow, yeah. And he went on to overthrow the French government on the island of Haiti. At the time, the French military was led by Napoleon Bonaparte, arguably the greatest European general in human history. He fought wars with him and won, right?
Wow, yeah.
And prevailed. He fought against the Americas, who was like, oh, look, there's a black nation coming up that France is struggling with. We're in beef with France, so we can just go take it over. No, Toussaint's there, right? I'm sorry. Spain tried to do the same thing. He took on all the major European powers of the time, and the only thing he had on his side was his belief that his people were stronger than slavery. That no matter what they do, this group of people that are behind me aren't going back to that system. Get it out of your head. So you show up with your cannons. The men were literally throwing themselves into cannons. Like
Right.
when you believe in yourself, when you know your purpose, and you have God behind you, literally nothing can stop you.
Right.
You start to scare your opponents. Like
That's it.
we showed up with Napoleon Bonaparte's army
Right.
and was laid to waste. Right?
Yeah, exactly.
And so it's something about the spark inside. I know I have it, and I see it when they have it. And I love meeting people like Jasmine Crockett, my former law partner,
Right.
for example, because I see in her eyes, you can't beat Jazz.
Right.
Good
Nah.
luck, right? Oh, you
Jazz
want to
is-
talk about her with your bleach blonde, bad built, butch body? Okay, bet. She's gonna come for you.
Right. No, she ain't laying down for you at all.
Right.
And that's a beautiful thing, right? Because it all starts within, and that's what the Genesis is about. Is I want my listeners and people that view this podcast to understand that the change begins with you. You were born to slay giants.
Mm-hmm.
I was telling somebody the other day, if you look at life this way, when your mama and your daddy did what they did and they laid down, there was one egg and there was 200 to 300 sperm that were on their race to that egg.
Mm-hmm.
You were the sperm that fertilized
You
the
won.
egg out of 200 to 300 sperm.
Mm-hmm.
So you are already a winner to even be here. So if you keep that mentality that I am a winner, and everything that we face is a building block for you to become who you want to become, and everything that God allows you to overcome is for your good.
Yeah.
Even though it might not look good or feel good in that instance, it's for your good.
Yeah.
And don't allow your habits to affect your harvest.
Mm-hmm.
And your habits are the things that you do, the things that you watch, the things that you listen to, the things that you say. Right? You watch all that in order for you to plant the right crop in order to manifest what God has designed for you to manifest. It's really up to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
That's why the people say, well, how I heard somebody ask me the other day, well, they say that many are called but few are chosen. So what makes the chosen chosen? The chosen make the choice.
They answer the call.
They answer the call.
Mm-hmm.
That's the difference between a chosen person and a person who would never accomplish what they were set here to do.
Yeah.
And the richest place on this earth is the graveyard, because so many of us go with unfulfilled dreams, unfulfilled destiny, books, songs, speeches, businesses, the whole nine.
Never manifested.
Never manifested because we didn't do the work. So I am glad to hear you say, in the midst of everything that we talk about, for us as a group of people, everything starts at home.
Mm-hmm.
It's like they say, love, charity starts at home, then spreads abroad.
That's right.
We got to love ourselves first before anybody else can love us. We got to value ourselves first before anybody else can value us. And I can go on and on about that. But we're going to close out real quick here. Let's talk about this election and what you would like to see from us as a group of people, and kind of explain to me to the people, if you don't mind, because you hear this now. Kamala's done nothing for the black people. Trump, the economy's better with Trump. Like, I understand there's a lot of back and forth and a lot of rhetoric that goes forth. For me, the biggest thing is I go by the Bible, right? For the first two commandments are, one is thou shalt love the Lord thy God with all thy heart, all thy soul, all thy might, and the second is you should love your brother. Right?
How has the evangelical movement got behind Donald Trump? Like, when you start talking about just the basics of our faith, and I love that you started with the Ten Commandments, which is the seed of the Abrahamic faith. That's Judaism, that's Christianity, that's Islam. We all believe, we're supposed to believe in those basic principles. The first two most important commandments: love that God, the Lord your God. And if you think that Donald Trump is someone who loves God, then I don't think you understand what the love of God is, or what love even is. If you think Donald Trump is someone who loves his neighbors, based on his rhetoric, based on his past. But you know what? That's neither here nor there. I think we get too quickly caught up into this system again that they created, and we forget who we are in them, right? You mentioned that when you and I met, I was working for DISD. I had a plan then to reform criminal justice in Dallas, Dallas, Fort Worth, regionally in North Texas, and then across the 50 states. I didn't know how to move from point A to point B. It was just, this is the vision, right? Man, I lost my train of thought.
We had a plan. We're talking about, you know, the race and kind of.
All right. And so we saw in 2020, right? That was 2016, 2015. From 2015 to 2020, we saw an inflection point in our movement. This was my first time when I say in our movement. That was my goal. I didn't care who was in office, right? It didn't affect me that much. Most of the people who were in office in the state that I was operating in Texas were not going to be on the reform, progressive bandwagon. I could say, all right, well, I guess I can't do the work here, or I have to be able to work without it. 2020 was an inflection point. That's when everyone became aware of the movement that we had been working on. That was with George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. But, you know, we had seen Jordan Edwards and Tatiana and so many cases out here already, right? And it keeps causing me to lose my train of thought. When I got to talk to my people, the people who were concerned about the movement that God had put inside of me and the work that we were doing, it wasn't, hey, make sure we get these Democrats in office. It was, know that you are powerful first. There's people power. That means you all showing up, putting that light on yourself, doing what God called you to do. Then it was political power. Political power is something that we must exercise. Choose a side, right? I honestly cannot tell you what side to choose. If there's something about the Republican agenda that comports with what God has placed inside of you, by all means, but show up and exercise your political power. That is a tool that we can't afford to put away. Right. And so if there's something about the Democratic Party, which is the party that my movement is working with, that have received the most support in the movement, but mind you, of course, I showed up to the Trump White House and had the debate. I showed up to Republican ran Senate and talked about police reform. So I really don't care. It's not going to change my purpose. I ran for office here in Texas in 2021 against Ken Paxton and a Republican agenda that seemed insurmountable. I ran because I wanted to learn about it, but I ran because I knew that if God gave me the vision for it, He would provide the provisions for it, and that we can win that office if necessary. So when we step into this political scene, this political arena, I hope that we don't get lost in the propaganda shuffle of left versus right, blue versus red. Remember what our purpose is, how politics is tied to our purpose, knowing that that's one thing to do, but there can't be a drop-off after 2024 for another 4 years. Right. Just like there was a drop-off after 2020. Yeah. We just let it go. 4 years later, they announced suddenly everyone's like, hey, Lee, come and host a panel about voting. What have we done for police reform in the last 4 years?
Since that,
So, we just can't continue that cycle. So I said a bunch of words to get us back around to the point that, show up this political season. Be adamant. Get your friends out to vote. But it has to be toward whatever God has put in your life, whatever purpose God has put in your heart. Because if it ends there, you were literally a political pawn, and that's what we can't afford to be.
Right. I appreciate that advice, and it makes me think. It's like I'll use this analogy. You had certain players that they just want to show up to the game. They never wanted to come to practice, and all they cared about was the stats and the scoreboard. But as my favorite coach says, you have to trust the process, and you don't have to forget the scoreboard. Do the daily discipline, the things that you need to do on a daily basis to move yourself forward in order to change the outcome. And we as a group of I would say men need to do the inner work and trust our process, our healing process, emotionally, spiritually, physically, like to take care of ourselves in all facets of life, deal with our trauma, deal with our issues, so we can overcome all these self-limiting beliefs that we have in order to get to our purpose, to be able to be a productive person and be able to complete our assignment for us, because I often tell people, you're not here just to be here.
That's right.
There's no way that you beat 300 other sperms to that egg just for you to just be here and do nothing. Like, so get to figuring out who you are, what you were going to become, what your purpose is, and then do the work.
That's right.
Right. So in closing, I want to ask you this. Give me 3 things that you would tell a man that he could do or suggest to that a man can implement in his daily ritual to become a version of himself that he looks in the mirror and he feels good about that man.
Yeah. I start with a daily devotional routine where you sit in quiet and you commune with God. And, for what it's worth, I know that I struggle with that because I'm not a person who hears voices. I don't hear the voice of God. Some people do.
Right.
And, more power to them. That wasn't me. I didn't commune. I didn't get a lot from people preaching at me from a pulpit for the same reason that I didn't do well in a traditional classroom setting. But I needed to explore myself and the God within me and God's presence within me on a routine basis, on a daily basis. And so I encourage everyone to set aside a period of time. Could be 20 minutes, could start off as 15 minutes. It's been as short as 5 minutes for me. It's been as long as 5 hours. But start off your day refocusing yourself on the God inside and his purpose for your life. I say write it out. You have to write out both your daily goals, your weekly goals, your monthly goals, your yearly goals. I always ask my brothers about what's your 5-year plan, and my brothers are annoyed by that. Well, one of my brothers is annoyed. I don't have a 5-year plan. I got a 5-week plan. I'm just trying to pay the bills at the end of the month. And I think you need to write out your entire vision. I've talked about journaling since I was a kid, but now when I go back and look at those journals, without exception, everything that I wrote down that I said God had for me was delivered. Right? It may have not come at the time that I thought it was going to come or how I thought it was going to come, but it showed out, and I think that's part of writing. And listen, there's nothing new under the sun. I think that one of the best ways that you can accomplish something is that you can see people accomplish it. For me, I discovered seeing people, learning about their lives. I've walked with them. I felt like I have an intimate relationship with Nelson Mandela, who I've never met, because I read his books. Right. He wrote. And so read, meditate, and write it out.
Right. That's good, man. So in closing, I would say is everybody understand this. You're the antidote to somebody's problem, meaning you're the solution to somebody's problem. You have to figure out what that thing that bothers you the most is typically the thing that you are probably meant to address, right? So figure out what bothers you the most and start to do the work, right? And once you do the work, you'll see the results. I'm big on the work because you cannot get around the work. You can't escape the work. There is no shortcut to the work. The work is the work. And what I've heard you say this entire time we've sat down and had a discussion is you've done the work. You read the books. You realize, right? You took accountability, right? There's 4 steps to accountability. The first step is awareness. The second step is awareness. The third step is action. And the 4th step is adjustment. So you're aware that I need to make a change if I want my life to be different, right? You accepted that if I don't make a change, my life is going to be the same. You accepted that you were dealing with some things that might not have been in your favor, but you figured out an action plan to overcome them. And then as you move through that action plan, you made the necessary adjustments to get where you want, right? So I'm saying that to say, everybody, it all starts with accountability. And they say if it's to be, it's up to me. And that I know that's a colloquialism, and that we hear that all the time, but it literally is that simple.
Yeah.
When you begin to do the work and begin to make the changes, and you take yourself back to the starting place where you were broken, and start rebuilding those breaches, you begin to become a man that is unstoppable and so powerful that you can slay a giant and cut the giant's head off after you slay it.
That's right.
A lot of times we slay the giant and then we don't cut his head off,
Yeah.
and then we wonder why he comes back to life.
Yeah.
Man, I want to tell you thank you,
Thank you.
One Team, for coming out and supporting your DP.
Of course.
Love you, bro.
Love you, bro.
Keep doing what you're doing, man. And you know, you always got my support. I'm only a phone call away. Tell people, you know, what Lee Merritt has up, how they can follow you, how they can support what you have going on.
I just have to say something because you brought in David and Goliath, and I'm a giant killer, right? Mm-hmm. Killing giants is fun, right? Because it's the fact that you're facing a giant that everyone thinks is too big and too powerful to overcome, and you're mismatched, and you show up, and then God does the work for you, and you get all the glory. Now, of course, you give the glory to God,
right? But
you get the glory from it. And and I know I'm extending this, but throwing in the last point that you made about, I followed a similar alliteration when I was teaching kids in Atlanta. I said, first you have to become aware. It started at the same place. It was 3 A's. The second part, I said, you have to become kind of affronted. Mm-hmm. Once you're aware of how society's walked up, your calling in life, then you gotta get pissed off. You gotta take it personally. Mm-hmm. Look, you're aware of the opposition against you. You're aware of the challenges, the giants in front of you. Take it personally. And that's what David did. You know, when he saw Goliath, he said, how dare this dirty Philistine.
Yeah, that's what he
you
said.
Know what I'm saying? And then you got to get active. And, right. it ends on action. And even when I talk about meditation, at my purest self, I love the work. Mm-hmm. I don't need the awards. Mm-hmm. I don't need the accolades. I need to show up for Zion Carr, mm-hmm. whose auntie was murdered in front of him. I need to be there for him. Right. And when I show up to do that work, I'm fulfilled. It's done. You know what I'm saying? Uh-huh. And so aware, fronted, active is my goal. If you want to reach me, I'm online, LeeMerrittESQ.com. On Instagram, I'm Lee Merritt ESQ. On Facebook, I'm Lee Merritt ESQ. I am teaching now at Harvard for trial advocacy in the fall.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
Okay.
I am, what else am I doing? Right, like you said, we're getting through this campaign season, and so I'm a hip hop caucus representative. I sit on the Malcolm X Center's board, and we're hosting some activities around voting. But you know, just doing the work. So catch me in traffic.
Wow. Hey, first of all, kudos on becoming a professor at Harvard.
Thank you.
Y'all hear that? This brother is from South Central LA, grew up in gang culture, and is now a professor at Harvard. You can't tell me what God will not do if you allow God to break you down to the least compound so he can build you back up, right? So that is a powerful way to close. You know, I thank you for coming. Appreciate y'all for tuning into this episode of The Genesis. This your boy CY, Mr. 8020. You know my mantra is stop talking tough, living weak. And if you don't like what you're getting out, change what you're putting in, because it's all up to you. This has been your boy CY. This is Genesis Podcast, and we gone.